Attention Caribbean authors and creators. Are you looking to elevate your literary journey? This is Kevin George, your host and presenter from TLC Tropical Literature Creatives, and I'm thrilled to share an exciting opportunity with you, introducing our bespoke promotional services designed exclusively for authors of Caribbean heritage. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a rising star, we're here to amplify your voice. From getting the word out about your book launch, your self-publishing services, or workshops, to sharing services that you offer to fellow authors and creatives. Visit our website or reach out to us today to explore how we can tailor our expertise to showcase your literary brilliance. Let's unlock the next chapter of success together. Greetings, listenership. Welcome to TLC Tropical Literature Creatives, the podcast where we interview authors of Caribbean heritage about themselves and about their literary works. Today we have with us our guest, the winsome Wayne Jordan.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the interview.
Okay, well, Wayne, there's usually a scenario that I give to persons when it is I feature them on the podcast, and the scenario is this. Imagine we encounter each other at the airport. I'm coming to Barbados for the very first time. What would you recommend that I try? What places, what food would you recommend to me, being a first-time visitor in Barbados?
Obviously, one of the first things I would say is that you have to spend as much time at the beach on the beach as possible. There are some other places of interest like Harrison's Cave, which is we consider as one of the wonders of the modern world. For me, you must try cuckoo and flying fish, which is one of my favorite dishes. And I can't. I'm trying to think as a local for tourists. Yeah, but those are the main places. I think one things I would say you need to visit our museum. Recently we opened in our what we call Hero Square. There's a new monument that replaces the old statue of Nelson that we had in Bridgetown. And that is to me worthwhile seeing.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from Wayne himself. Harrison's Cave, the food, and the monument in Heroes Park. Well, Wayne, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was because, this coming week, we have Valentine's Day is coming up. So I wanted to talk to you, a writer who would have been involved heavily in writing romances. Can you tell me a little bit about your history in the genre?
Let's say in about 2000, I started thinking about writing for an international publisher. Up to then, I didn't think it was possible, but then the internet started to open up and I saw the possibilities. I joined a writers community called Painted Rock, and I met a lot of writers from the US, but a couple from other places too. And we used to write, share what we wrote, critique what we wrote. And there were quite a few there who were thinking of possibly writing for a publisher. I remember one lady, Melissa, she told me, you have a really nice voice for writing romance. Because at that time I was just writing short stories. And she said, I said, well, maybe that's true, because I did a lot of reading. I read romance, I read mystery. My main genre of interest is actually mystery and procedurals. But I took up what she said and I decided to write a romance because I did have a knowledge of it because of reading. And I submitted the manuscript to a competition that there is every year. There's a romance slam jam conference every year in the United States, and they have an aspiring writers contest. So I entered it, and I became one of the finalists. And suddenly here I am making plans to go to the conference because I've never been to a conference in the United States before. So I went, and lo and behold, on the night of the award ceremony, I won the Aspiring Writers Contest. And part of that was a book contract with B.E.T. Books, because B.E.T. at that time had a book line called Arabesque. And the manuscript was submitted to Arabesque, and they liked it. And they gave me my first contract. One of the interesting things about that, the same month my book was to come out, November 2005, Harlequin Publishing, the biggest romance publisher in the world, purchased B.E.T. Books. So I automatically became a Harlequin writer. And you know, that's where it all started.
And I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
No, I mean, for some persons listening, it sounds like you're living the dream that a lot of writers, or rather, I should say, you would have lived the dream that a lot of writers aspire towards. You know, you have a manuscript, you do a book, and a publisher, decides to take you up on it, and here you are, being a writer full time. In terms of,
I don't know. It was, to me, that the day I received the call, it was like surreal. I could not believe it was possible. But 13 books later, and it's all good.
We had spoken before, and I understand that you've retired from, how should I put this, quotey fingers, writing professionally, if I should put it like that. That you're taking it easy. You're not writing for a publisher like that, but you're still doing your writings. The writings that you're doing now, are they self-published works, or are you doing work for another publisher at the moment?
The last book I wrote, which came out in 2019, was my first self-published book. And I think it happened more, I think I'm more a self-published writer because of circumstance. I think it was 2017, I had a stroke. And what that did was take me out of the writing for a while, because by profession, I'm a teacher. I've taught 38 years. So I wasn't a full-time writer. I was a full-time teacher. So writing was more of a hobby that I did along with my day job. But then in 2017, after I had a stroke, I didn't renew my contract with them. It took a while for me to get back into writing. And then COVID happened, and I decided, well, something, I'm soon retiring. Just let me spend the last couple of years, my last 2 or 3 years teaching. And then when I retire, I'll go back into writing full time. I'll go back into writing, do it full time. And that's exactly what happened, because last year I retired. I decided 2003 was 23 was my year to relax, do nothing at all, but go to the gym and read and watch movies. So from the beginning of this year, I started back writing. And I think I'm not sure what I want to do, because I know my publisher, Harlequin, wants me to come back and write for them. But I like the freedom that comes with writing for self-publishing, because you're under no deadlines. And I know that when I had my stroke, that was one of the reasons, being stressed by deadlines and marking essays and having essays done by having them marked by a specific time. So I like the freedom. But one of the things about being published by a traditional publisher that I liked was that you only have to write. You only have to write, and they would do everything else. My editor did everything. The artwork was done by somebody that I didn't have to get involved in the business aspect of it. I just wrote, and I was paid. That last book that I self-published in 2019, I learned a lot through that, but there's so much that you have to do when you're self-publishing. And one of the things I do, I learned everything so that I could do everything myself. but I miss the traditional publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up in the air on what I decide to do. I think now that am retired, I probably want to feel the same kind of pressure that I did to meet deadlines because I don't have to worry about my day job anymore. So I'm still deciding what to do.
Ah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of really interesting things there. Well, for one, I
Mhm.
mean, it it's one thing to be retired and starting your own line of books by doing
Mhm.
self-publishing. And then you seem that you're mentioning, hey man, Harlequin still wants me back. And a lot of persons who I'm sure listening to this, their mouths are probably,
Mhm.
there's drool running out of their mouths and they're like, man, Harlequin wants him back. I mean, so yeah, that is very interesting as well. It shows the caliber of your work and it shows the
Mhm.
contribution that you would be making to the organization. So that is encouraging. You said that you had written at least one book, your first self-published book. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
That's another interesting long story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible. I
Hmm.
mentioned that every year I used to go to a African American conference in the United States,
Hmm.
and I had this years ago. Harlequin did a series of books by different authors, multiple authors, that looked at romance. It was called A Century of Romance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was a series of 10 books that were set in a series that was set in the 20th century. So the
Hmm.
first book would have been like the late 1890s, and it came all the way up because I think it was done in like 1980 something. So the books went up to that time. And I'd always had this concept in my mind, this idea in my mind to create that, but from an African American point of view.
Ah.
So I conceptualized in my mind what I wanted. And then I approached some several authors that I had a relationship with from going to the conferences every year and get to know each other. So what I did, we did I conceptualized this series called Decades, Journey of African American Romance. And
Hmm.
what I wanted to do was one, to highlight, yes, romance in each decade of the 20th century, but also deal with the African American, the Black experience. So I got the authors together, and 12 of them, each of us came up with our individual story. My story is set in 1960s, which is the decade that I was born in. One of the reasons why I wanted to do it, but it also focused on um, the migration of um, Barbadians to the U.S. because it's
Hmm.
set in the U.S. It's partly set in Barbados and partly set in the U.S. So the heroine, she moves to the U.S. with her mother because her mother had gone up, and then she got involved in the Black movement with Martin Luther King. So within the book itself, the highlight of the book is when Martin Luther King is assassinated.
Oh.
So each of these stories starts in the 1900s and
Mhm.
comes all the way goes. There are actually 12 books, so it goes into the year 2010 to 2020 when Obama was president. So that's the last book in this series. So that to me was an interesting concept because the authors were all enthusiastic about it, and the books actually came out into 18. Mine came out into 19. There was supposed to be one book each month, but mine, because I had this stroke, I had to um I had to put it off. So mine came
Okay.
out a year after the others came out. But I
Okay.
think I think the readers understood because I had the stroke. Um, but it has done pretty well. I remember Oprah's um, publicist or one of the production people in, indicated an interest in it, but it never went anywhere.
Okay.
But
Okay.
that's something I would like to see happen. To me, I thought it was interesting enough because not only did it deal with romance, but it dealt with specific the Black experience in each decade that story takes place.
You had to do like a level of research to put
Yeah, oh yeah. Because something I found out, we all hear about the what's her name, the one in the bus,
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks, and I didn't. It's only during that research that I found out that it actually happened to another lady before it happened to her. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Yeah. So that was interesting because I always thought that Rosa Parks was the first person that it happened to. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other things I found out, there's this Black lady in Harlem that started this restaurant, and it was out of her home, and a lot of celebrities used to go there. So one of the scenes is actually set when my heroine and the hero goes to that restaurant. So a lot of things happen in that book that the research it actually brought me into to the knowledge of things that I didn't know existed. So it was interesting from that point of view. I think also I tried to set it started in Barbados because it flashed back to the heroine's upbringing here. So there are some parts of my heroine went to the same school that I taught at. So, you know, looking back, even doing research back then into the 1960s was quite interesting. It was. So I really enjoyed the experience. And I you know, the 1970s book never came out. The author who was responsible for it, she took ill and she never completed. So I'm actually thinking about going back and complete the series because the series is technically incomplete. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about going back and doing that book to make sure it's complete.
What would your thoughts be if it is that this book in particular were to be translated into a film? How do you feel about that?
That I've always actually thought about that. It's interesting because I teach theater. I taught theater along with English. So that is an area that I'm also interested in, and I have a lot of past students who are working in film and the theater now who have spoken to about the possibilities, but it's thinking about the funding and all that I have to think about. But I've thought of that book as well as my first book, which is called Capture the Sunrise, which more the possibility of doing that one is a little more, it's easier because it's all set in Barbados. This one, the Promise Me a Dream, is set in Barbados and the US. So there are more technical things to look at there. So if I do a book to film, it'll probably be my first book, Capture the Sunrise.
As being an author who would have had to work for an establishment like Harlequin, like you mentioned, B.E.T books, I'm sure that there are authors who are listening and who would have liked to find themselves in a position similar to yours. What advice can you give to persons who have intentions or who have a desire to do something like that?
There's several things I always say to aspiring authors. One, know the genre. Make sure you know this genre and what the industry, what the editors and publishers are looking for. So take, for example, Harlequin has a lot of different lines of romances. Some that are romantic suspense, some that are contemporary, some that are traditional. So know the genre. I think it'll be a lot easier now to get into Harlequin because Harlequin has, I remember when I first started writing for Harlequin, when my book came out, my second book came out, they had now started their own African-American line. They'd taken over Harlequin, the B.E.T books, but eventually they integrated that into a what they call Kimani line that was focused on African-American books. Now, and it's something that I've also felt strongly about. They were still segregating us. They had all these lines, but our books, whether it was romance or whether it was suspense, fit nicely into the African American. I don't write African American. I write romance with African American main characters, protagonists. So eventually, say about 2-3 years ago, they dispensed with the command line, and now all the authors that want to still write for them are integrated into whatever category, whichever line they want to, whether they're writing inspirational, romantic suspense, traditional contemporary romance, which is something that a lot of us had always looked forward to. So one of the things to me, especially with Harlequin, know what lane they have and where you want to, which line you want to target. While an agent is not necessary, agents help. And it will get you into the publisher's notice quicker, because obviously they give priority to agented authors. So one, I would prefer, if you go with an editor, try to find an agent, because they help. And then make sure that you're a good writer, because they will not buy crap. So just make sure that your writing is good, and I think there's something I always thought as a teacher. I can teach you to be a competent writer, but I can't teach you to be a great writer. So some publishers have great writers, but they also have competent writers that are good, but lack the emotional. To me, that's something that stands out. And that's maybe why some writers become bestsellers and some writers become, their books are translated to fame, because they have that. But it doesn't mean that because you might not have that you can't make it, because you can. And that's it. And just write. Right. I always say, write from your heart. Write what you want. And then see which publisher will accept that. The other alternatives, obviously, is self-publishing. I don't think I've ever made as much money self-publishing as I did when I wrote for Harlequin. Maybe one of the reasons why I might go back to traditional writing, because it felt good getting, all this money. But self-publishing is an alternative. Because I didn't make it big in self-publishing, doesn't mean that you will not. You might be lucky. There's so many self-published authors, and Amazon makes it so much easier. You only have to write the book, and they'll do everything else.
One of the things I listened to when it is that you were recounting, your development as a writer, is that you actually entered that competition in the States. And I think that's something that authors could probably, keep in the back of their minds, because the competition, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, when it is that you enter competitions, there's a different kind of mindset that you have with the things that you're doing. Yeah, you become a bit meticulous in terms of your writing. You have persons check it over, because you want the work that you submit, you want it to be the best. And more so, it helps with the visibility, because you indicated that when it is that you had entered into the competition, that made persons notice you. So
yeah,
so
it definitely did. I think one of the things that I could account for my success too is I was a male in a female world. And I also had a pretty big American audience. I have a website that has been going on, I think it's about 30 years now, called Romance in Color. And what I did, I remember when I started it, I was reviewing for a website called All About Romance, Romance in the Block. And I did reviews of African American books for that website. And then I decided, something, they're doing it, but they're not doing it on a big scale. And at that time, there were only about two Black romances coming out every month. So I decided to start this website to review and interview authors of color, and it took off. And as over the 30-year period, the number of Black romances have increased. I have a staff now of 5 reviewers. I don't really do a lot of reviewing anymore. I started out by reviewing. And I think because of that, people got to know me. So when I started to write, I already had a built-in audience. And I think that's part of the reason why B.E.T at that time published me, because I had a big audience. People knew me. So when I went to my first conference in the United States, it was great because everybody knew me. Everybody knew me because of my writing. They also knew me because of romance and color. And then if you look at it this way, there's this not so bad dude from the islands with this what they call sexy accent. So it was great. It was really, really great. I've never seen anything. I've never, even in Barbados, I've never had that kind of reception. I remember going to when I went to my first conference and they had the book signing. People brought my books that they bought in suitcases to be signed. People have scrapbooks of my book covers, and it was like this thing actually happens. And it was always amazing to me that the reception from people that are not my people or not my home people has always been greater.
I hear you with that. I mean, there's a proverb. I think it goes, "Prophet is without honor except in his own country."
But I will say this though: it's not that Barbados, especially literary fraternity, has not been good to me. They have been. The NCF in Barbados, National Cultural Foundation, the literary world, the literary established organizations have been good to me. They have really been. I've done workshops. I remember one NIFCA, I was invited to be the special featured reader. Last year I was invited to be the speaker at the what we call Frank Collymore Endowment. I was the speaker there, and then they invited me to be part of the committee. I wouldn't say that the fraternity they have been good to me. So they have been.
I wanted to ask something. You're a teacher in addition to being a writer. That means that you have like perspective from both sides, and that just leads me to my other question. Right now, it is pretty much common knowledge that there's a challenge where reading is concerned. Persons aren't reading as much as they used to. We find ourselves engaging in different kinds of media. As a teacher and also as a writer, what advice can you think of to encourage us to read a bit more?
I don't even know if we can encourage people to read a little bit more. I think sometimes it is about how we see. Traditionally, we still see reading as buying a physical book and reading. But there's a lot of reading going on still. We might not think it is reading in a traditional way, but young people are still reading. And it's just sometimes that we are not creating the kind of writing they want to read. We tend to see it's my problem with sort of like my problem with the literary fraternity, where we feel that proper literature and proper reading
Go ahead, man.
is what we call, it has to be profound and sad. And I remember a student of mine said once, "Sir, these literature books that we have to read are so unhappy. Nothing happy happens." And I think that's part of it. We tend to feel that we big up, not that they shouldn't be bigged up, but we big up all these literary great, and most people don't want to read them. Most of them are read at schools and are not even read for pleasure, read because they're forced to. The school I taught at, for a couple of years, we only had a sixth form for just a little over 10 years. And I taught sixth form literature. And when we first started, the classes used to be big for a sixth form class, 10 students. This year, there's no lower six that does lit. A couple of years ago, we had to combine at my school. Two other schools might do it, have a good numbers. But starting with 10 and 15 students and then going down to where we had to have one class and put the upper six and lower six together, just shows nobody wants to read Biswas. And Biswas is one of my favorite writers. And it was hard for me to understand why students didn't enjoy these books as I did. I remember when I was in sixth form, we read these books and we enjoyed them. We enjoyed the discussion. And you have sixth formers now who are doing literature and they don't like the books. Sir, this book's so boring. It's a changed generation of children. Mm-hmm. And the things that interest them are not the things that interest us. And it's one of the realities that we have to face. Sad, but true.
For 2024, do you have any upcoming projects where books are concerned?
I have two things in mind. Well, right now I'm working on a book called The Clue in the Abandoned Lighthouse. It's a series of books that I want to work on that I've decided, I've conceptualized. My favorite genre is mystery, suspense, romance suspense. I've always liked it. Even my television reading is that. So I'm working on that book, and it's a book that I decided to write for teens. It's called the Dimitri Brown Mystery Series. But then something crossed my mind. I said, I could write a series for teenagers where he's in his 14, 15. And I've set in 1972, in the 70s. So he would be around my age when I was in the 1970s. So he's a little bit of me. But then I said, something, I want to write something with him, with an older detective. And then I said, it did cross my mind, why not set a series in the 1970s when he is Dimitri Brown, and then 20 years later, set another series where he is Detective Dimitri Brown. So that's the concept. So what I'm planning is each year, 2 books in those series, one when he's a teenager and one when he's an adult. And then along with that, still work on my romances. Because the romance that I want to work on now is a spin-off from my first book, Capture the Sunrise. I'm thinking about either calling it After the Rain or Chasing Rainbows. I haven't decided on a title yet, but that's the next book. Because my heroine in that book had a daughter called Melissa. And while the book was a romance, it dealt with domestic abuse. So I want to write Melissa's story, who's the daughter. Now she's an adult. And so that's the 3 things I want to work on this year.
We're about to wrap up. But I had one more question. In the spirit of Valentine's, which is right around the corner, I think some of our listeners are just curious. You being a romance writer, what is your favorite romance book or series of books?
My all-time favorite book is a book called Whitney, My Love. Strange enough, it's not by an African or American writer. But there was this romance author called Judith McNaught. And to me, she is a historical romance, but it was the first book that challenged the norms of the historical romance. The romance heroine at the time was supposed to be this proper lady. And here was this heroine that was this feisty individual who broke all the conventions of society. I remember Judith McNaught used to have in the back of her books, I write romance because I want readers to laugh and cry and laugh again. And that has always stuck with me because it highlighted what I thought is important in any book at all, the emotional appeal. I think that any book should evoke some sort of emotion, whether it be anger, whether it be disgust, whether it makes you laugh, whether it makes you cry. And that has always been my motto for writing. I want to make you laugh, I want to make you cry, and I want to make you laugh again. And that's who Wayne Jordan is, the writer.
You've been listening to TLC, Tropical Literature Creators. If you've heard something of interest or something you like, reach out to us. Reach out to our authors. Follow us on social media. We look forward to hearing from you.